Have you ever pushed your drone just a little too far? Well, I didn't plan on testing the range of the DJI Flip this day, but let's just say things escalated quickly. We're in Oppdal, Norway, a stunning mountain town known for its ski slopes and wild nature. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, where I messed up, and what I learned. The original idea wasn't to do a range test. As you can probably tell, I wasn't even recording the controller screen at the start. That's how spontaneous this was. But once I was up in the air, looking at the scenery, I thought, let's just see how far this thing could go. My rule was simple. Go out as far as possible while keeping at least 50% battery to get back safely. Well, that rule didn't quite save me. By the time I started recording the controller screen, I was already around 2 kilometers out and still had 78% battery. The drone was flying effortlessly, and the views absolutely next level. The flight started off smooth. I was gliding above the lush emerald meadows of Oppdal, tracing the curves of a river that shimmered under the Norwegian sun. Mountains framed the horizon in every direction, with light snow still clinging to some of the peaks even in summer. It was peaceful, too peaceful. I got a little lost in the moment. If you've never been to Oppdal, it's absolutely worth visiting, especially in winter if you're into skiing. But even in summer, like when I went, the landscape is breathtaking. Picturesque river carving through open plains, wildflowers swaying in the breeze, and mountain air so fresh it almost clears your mind. We had perfect weather that day, around 28 degrees Celsius in July. I kept flying, going farther, glancing back at the map to make sure I still had signal, and before I knew it, I was nearly 5 kilometers out. At that point, I still had 65% battery, so naturally I thought, why not go a bit further? A few more curves of the river, some stunning aerials of the mountains, and I was fully in my zone. This was content gold. But that was my second mistake. Somewhere between 5 and 6 kilometers, I was still flying over that same winding river, its deep blue curves cutting gently through the green valley below. At about 6 kilometers out, everything started to go sideways. The signal dropped, completely gone. The screen froze for a second, and just like that, the drone triggered return to home on its own. It still had 60% battery, so I thought, okay, not ideal, but it should make it. Except, I had underestimated one critical thing: headwind. As the drone turned around and began its journey back, I watched the return speed sit stubbornly at 7 meters per second, well below the cruising speed I was hoping for. At this pace, the math didn't look good. So I took over, canceled return to home, and switched to manual control. First thing I did? Dropped altitude from 100 meters to around 50. The idea was to get under the worst of the wind. It gave me a small bump in speed, but that still wasn't enough. So I brought it even lower, carefully watching the terrain lines on the controller map. I didn't want to risk losing signal again by dropping too low too fast. At moments, I'd see the speed briefly flirt with 11 meters per second, but it just wouldn't hold. The headwind kept pushing back like an invisible wall. I adjusted again. Down to 30 meters now, trying to slice through the calmer layers of air. Every little tweak helped, but I was fighting for every single meter per second. Meanwhile, the battery was draining faster than I wanted to admit. It was holding around 35%. Then dropped to 32. At about 3.5 kilometers from home, I still had 30% battery. Doable? Maybe. But I wasn't confident anymore. By the time it hit 23%, the drone was still 3 kilometers out. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end well. So I switched from hoping to planning. Started scanning for a safe landing spot, away from homes. Not on a road, definitely not in one of the lakes below. I aimed for somewhere near a road so we could get to it by car if needed. Then the dreaded message popped up. Critically low battery, forced landing initiated. At that point, I could only guide where it would land, not whether it could. And then, signal lost. That was it. The DJI Flip landed about 1.9 kilometers away from the takeoff point. So my friend and I jumped in the car and started the search. Luckily, I had a general idea of where it went down thanks to the DJI Find My Drone feature. We followed the map, and there it was, right beside a road, safe and sound. No damage, no water landing, just dusty and humbled with some grass blades in the wings. Here's the thing. Even when I had 70% battery and was only 4 kilometers out, the drone already knew it might not make it back. So the biggest lesson? Trust your drone's battery warnings. Thanks for watching.